Good evening, Virgo. So they walked in loaded, prepared, rehearsed, carrying everything they had collected against you like ammunition in a bag they had been packing for a while, each piece selected with care, each item chosen for its capacity to do the maximum amount of damage in a public setting where damage is hardest to recover from because there are witnesses. They had a plan, and the plan was you, the undoing of you, the specific, deliberate, executed in front of people dismantling of the version of you that exists in the minds of the people who matter in whatever arena this happened in. The plan was to open the bag in front of an audience, to lay the contents out one by one, to let what they had assembled speak for itself and watch the room's understanding of you shift in the direction they had engineered it to shift. They were so sure. That is the part I want you to hold on to before anything else in this reading. The confidence with which they arrived, the specific, settled certainty of someone who has done the preparation, knows what they are carrying, and has enough experience with how these things go to believe that what they had was enough, that the case they had built was solid, that the audience was receptive, that the outcome was, if not guaranteed, then strongly likely. They were so sure, and then something happened that nobody in that room saw coming. Not the audience, not the people who were present and watching and had come with their own expectations about how the event was going to unfold, not the person who walked in with the bag, and not perhaps even you. Stay with me, Virgo, because what came through today arrived with the specific, almost cinematic quality of a scene, so unexpected that even the universe seems to have leaned in to watch how it resolved. And I want to walk you through every moment of it. Let me tell you about the bag. What was in it, what they had assembled and how they had assembled it, and what the contents were supposed to do when they were brought out into the open in front of people who did not yet have their own opinion formed about what they were about to see. The contents were truths, partial ones, the specific, carefully curated kind of truths that are more dangerous than outright lies because they cannot be refuted in the moment without the context that disproves them, and that context is never as available in a public setting as it would be in a private conversation. Half truths are the most effective ammunition there is. They have the structural integrity of fact and the destructive capacity of fiction, and they are almost impossible to counter in real time because any denial sounds defensive, and defensiveness in a public setting reads as guilt. They knew this. They had picked the contents accordingly, every piece selected not simply because it was damaging, but because it was specifically difficult to defend against, because it required context to neutralize, and context requires time, and time was not going to be available once the contents of the bag were in the room. They had thought about this carefully. They had prepared for the Virgo capacity to see clearly and respond precisely, had anticipated the potential responses, and had engineered the ammunition to require more than a response, to require a dismantling of the entire frame, which is a much larger task than simply answering a question. They thought they had you. Let me speak to the room itself, because a public exposure requires a public. And the public in this reading is not a passive backdrop. They are active participants in what unfolds, whether they intend to be or not, because the reaction of an audience shapes the momentum of a confrontation in real time. The room had expectations, not uniformly hostile. Rooms rarely are, even in these situations. There were people in that space who were genuinely neutral, who came without a position and were prepared to be informed by what they witnessed, who would have been moved by what was in the bag if the bag had functioned the way it was designed to function. There were also people who came already sympathetic to the person carrying the bag, who had heard things in the lead up to this moment, who arrived with the soft conviction of people who have been told a version of events by someone they had reason to trust and who had not yet encountered any reason to revise that version. And there were one or two, and this is important, hold on to this, who knew better, who had their own knowledge of the full picture, who were present in that room with information that the person carrying the bag did not know they had, who were sitting quietly, watching the setup unfold, waiting to see what was going to happen before they decided whether to say anything. They had not planned to say anything. Events changed that plan. Let me speak to the moment the turn happened, because there was a specific moment, a precise pivot point, before which everything was moving in one direction and after which everything moved in another. And the pivot happened so quickly and so completely that people in the room are still processing what they witnessed. The person carrying the bag began to open it, started with what they believed was the strongest piece, the one designed to land first and set the frame for everything that followed, the one that, if received as intended, would have colored every subsequent piece with the specific lens of suspicion that makes an audience interpret everything in the worst possible light. And something went wrong. Not with the delivery. The delivery was confident and clear and landed the way they intended it to land. The words came out correctly. The framing was what they prepared. The first piece of the bag's contents was presented exactly as rehearsed. The problem was the room. The room did not respond the way a room responds when the first piece lands cleanly. There was no ripple of the particular energy that moves through an audience when they receive information that shifts their understanding of someone in a significant direction. There was a different energy, quieter, more watchful, the specific quality of a room that has received something and is holding it up against something else it already knows, rather than simply accepting it as new information. Someone in the room already knew, and the something they knew was enough to make the first piece wobble, not fall, not yet, but wobble in a way that the person with the bag could feel even as they were delivering the next piece. A wobble that entered their confidence the way a splinter enters skin small, immediately uncomfortable, impossible to ignore, even when the thing causing it is not yet visible. I want to speak to what happened next, because this is where the reading becomes what the title promises, and I want to honor the specificity of it. The person with the bag continued. They had momentum and they had preparation, and they were not going to abandon a plan they had invested this much in because of a wobble they could not yet fully explain. They reached for the second piece, and that is when the room spoke, not dramatically, not in the form of a single person standing up and delivering a rebuttal that reversed the entire momentum in one clean movement. That is the cinematic version of this moment. What actually happened was quieter and in some ways more devastating than the cinematic version, because it happened in the register of the ordinary, in the way that truth tends to surface in groups, not through announcement, but through the accumulation of small, unremarkable moments that collectively become impossible to ignore. Someone asked a question, a simple one, the kind that sounds like clarification rather than challenge. The kind that, if the answer to it is what most questions' answers are, resolves in a sentence and the momentum continues uninterrupted. The answer was not what the person with the bag expected, because the question, simple as it sounded, required them to account for something they had not accounted for, a detail, a specific, verifiable, this is either true or it is not detail that could not be finessed or contextualized or reframed into something that served the narrative. A detail that had a right answer and a wrong answer, and only one of those answers was going to hold up in front of people who could check. They chose the wrong answer, not out of stupidity, out of the specific, dangerous confidence of someone who has been in control of the information and forgot that other people might have access to information they did not account for. And the room felt it immediately. And the room felt it immediately. Let me speak to what happened in the room in the moments after that wrong answer landed. Because the audience is not a passive element in this story, and their experience of the pivot is part of what makes the pivot as significant as it is. There is a quality that moves through a group of people when the thing they are watching changes shape unexpectedly. It does not announce itself. It does not produce immediate noise or visible reaction in most of the people present. It is more like a shift in temperature. A collective, almost simultaneous recalibration that happens beneath the level of expressed response in the internal space where people are processing what they are witnessing before they have decided what to make of it. That shift happened, and the people who arrived neutral felt it most immediately because they had no prior investment in either direction, no narrative to protect, nothing to gain from the exposure, succeeding or failing, except the simple human interest in what is actually true. And what they were suddenly feeling in that room was the specific discomfort of something not adding up, of a picture being presented to them that had just developed a visible crack in a place where the picture was supposed to be solid. Some of them exchanged looks, the kind that do not require words because the look is the whole communication. The one that says, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" The one that asks the question and answers it simultaneously. Yes, I see it. And no, it is not what we were told it was going to be. Those looks are what preceded the defense. The defense arrived into a room that was already turning. Does this feel like something that happened recently, Virgo? A public moment in whatever form public takes in your particular life, where someone arrived with an agenda and left with something other than what they came for? Let me know in the comments. Tell me what arena this landed in for you. Tell me who the room was. Because I feel this is very specific for many of you, not metaphor, not general energy, an actual recent happened in your life situation that this reading is naming with a precision that is going to feel like recognition rather than interpretation. Now let me tell you about the defense, because this is the part that nobody in that room was prepared for, not the audience, who had come to watch one thing and ended up watching something entirely different, not the neutral parties, who had arrived without a position and left with one that was not the one the person with the bag had intended to install, and not the person with the bag themselves, who had arrived to expose you and found themselves, through a sequence of events that moved faster than they could navigate, in the position of having to say something true about you in public, whether they wanted to or not. The defense did not come from you. You did not have to defend yourself, which is the most important part of this entire reading, and the reason the title uses the word instead. Someone who arrived in that room prepared to be part of the exposure became, through the logic of what unfolded, part of the defense, publicly, visibly, in front of everyone who came, expecting to witness one kind of story and found themselves inside a completely different one. What they said varied depending on which version of this situation is yours. For some of you, it was factual, a correction, a piece of information that made the bag's contents impossible to sustain in the form they were being offered. For others, it was characterological, a statement about who you actually are that contradicted the character being described, delivered with the specific weight of someone who knows from direct experience and is not speaking theoretically. For others, it was simply a question, the right question, the one that, once asked in front of the people present, required an answer that no honest answer could provide without unraveling the entire structure. However it came, what it did was the same. It turned the room, not slowly, not with the gradual tide turning momentum of a long argument shifting through stages toward a conclusion, with the specific, sudden before and after quality of a moment where the frame breaks and everyone present sees simultaneously that what they were looking at is not what they were told they were looking at. Inhale. Let me speak to what happened to the person with the bag when the defense came, because I feel their interior in this moment with a clarity I want to deliver precisely, not to produce satisfaction at their expense, though the satisfaction would be understandable, but because understanding what happened in them is part of the complete picture of what this moment means. The confidence left the room first. Before the actual mechanics of what they had planned fell apart, before the audience's energy shifted, before any visible external sign that the plan was failing was available to observe, the certainty drained out of them in a way they could feel but could not show. Because showing it would have been the final piece of evidence that everything they had brought into the room was less solid than it needed to be. So they held the face while the inside of the performance collapsed, while the realization arrived that the information they thought they controlled had other custodians, that the narrative they had constructed had witnesses who did not share it, that the audience they had come to turn against you was not turning the way they had calculated, and that the person who had just spoken, the person who came to that room with no plan and left having altered everything, had done more to define you in the mind of everyone present in 30 seconds than the bag's entire contents had managed to do in the time it was being opened. They had the worst kind of moment a person can have in public, the moment of being exposed while attempting to expose someone else. Let me speak to what the room walked away with, because rooms remember things. Public moments have a specific persistence that private ones do not. They live in the shared memory of everyone who witnessed them. They get discussed afterward, in the quieter conversations that follow public events, in the processing that happens when people who observed something together work out collectively what they actually saw. What the room walked away with is a picture of you that the person with the bag did not intend to paint. A picture of someone who does not require defense because their truth arrives in the room before the attack does, who cannot be successfully exposed because the exposure requires an audience that does not have access to the actual you. And the actual you has a way of being known by enough people in enough contexts that a constructed narrative about you cannot survive contact with the people who know better. You are too real to be successfully lied about in rooms where real people are present. We established this in a different reading, in different terms, but here it is again from a different direction, proving itself in a very specific and very public way. The room walked away knowing something about you that the person with the bag spent significant time and energy trying to prevent the room from knowing that you are exactly who you appear to be, and that exactly who you appear to be is not someone who can be taken down by what was in that bag. As I close this reading, I want to leave you with the thing I feel most specifically belongs to you in this moment. You did not win this by fighting. That is the part that deserves to be named clearly. Because the story the title tells could be interpreted as a victory you engineered, a strategy you executed, a move you made that turned the board in your favor. And none of that is what happened. What happened is that you simply existed in the way that you exist, with the specific, integrated, cannot be successfully counterfeited quality of someone who is the same person in every room to every audience, with or without witnesses, who does not have a public version and a private version and a version for people who might be evaluating them, who is simply and completely themselves at all times in all contexts. And that consistency, that absolute, unperformable, impossible to fabricate consistency, is what made the bag's contents impossible to deliver. Because you cannot construct a convincing false version of someone who has been consistently real in front of too many people for too long. The real version is already everywhere, already known, already held in the minds of enough people that a contradictory version cannot take root because there is no space for it. They came to plant something. The ground was already full of you. Leave me a comment below. Tell me what arena this happened in. Tell me who the person with the bag was. Tell me what the moment of the turn felt like from where you were standing. I read every single word. Every story, every comment, I carry them all. Until next time, Virgo. They came to expose you. They left having proven the opposite, and the room remembers what it witnessed. So do you.